You said love was forever, Ethan. Then why did you walk away so easily? The words hung in the air, trembling between heartbreak and disbelief. Outside, New York's skyline shimmered beneath the rain, the kind that turns glass windows into mirrors of regret. Inside the penthouse, Amelia Hayes stood motionless, clutching the wedding ring he'd left on the marble counter. Her reflection looked like a stranger, calm on the surface, shattered beneath. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Vale of Hearts, a place where love finds its way through the quietest corners of the soul. I'm done. Emma, you're not the woman I need anymore. The sentence hit harder than any scream could. For a few seconds, the penthouse went completely still. Outside, the New York skyline glittered beneath the rain, cold, distant, indifferent. Inside, Emma Carter stood frozen, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and heartbreak. Across the room, Nathan Reed, her husband, her once partner in everything, adjusted his cufflinks without looking at her. His tone was calm, detached, as if he were simply closing another business deal. You'll have the apartment for the week. After that, my lawyer will handle the paperwork. The settlement is fair. I suggest you take it. He tossed a thick white envelope onto the marble counter. It landed with a dull thud that echoed through the room like the sound of something ending. Emma stared at it, then at him. After 12 years? That's all I get. A week in an envelope? Nathan sighed, impatient, his expression almost bored. You got more than most, Emma. Don't make this messy. His phone buzzed. He glanced down, and her heart sank when she saw the name lighting up his screen. Sierra Blake, the model. The one from the glossy magazines, the woman half her age. Something inside Emma went completely quiet. So this is what you call love now? She asked softly. Trading years for youth? Nathan's voice hardened. Don't turn this into a tragedy. You and I both know the marriage died long before Sierra came along. She just reminded me what being alive feels like. He turned away, slipping into his tailored jacket. His reflection in the window looked untouchable, the kind of man who never believed consequences could reach him. Emma's hands trembled, but her voice didn't. And the promises, Nathan? The vows you made, do they mean nothing? He stopped at the door, shoulders tightening. For the briefest moment, she thought he might turn back, but when he finally spoke, his words were sharp enough to cut. Forever is just a word people use when they're afraid to let go. Then the door closed. Silence filled the room, heavy and endless. The rain tapped against the glass like faint applause for a tragedy only she could feel. Emma looked down at the envelope, untouched on the counter. Beside it, her wedding ring shimmered under the dim light. Once it had meant devotion. Now it felt like a weapon. She picked it up slowly, staring at her reflection in the glass. The woman looking back wasn't broken. Not yet. Just quiet, waiting. Because deep down, beneath the ache, something small and fierce had begun to stir. A whisper. A promise. He thought he'd ended her story. But he had just written its beginning. The night Nathan left, the rain didn't stop. It followed her into morning, soft, relentless, and cold. Emma hadn't slept. She sat by the window until dawn, watching the city that once felt alive now blur behind streaks of water. The penthouse, once their shared dream, had turned into a museum of everything she'd lost. Every corner whispered his name. By sunrise, she finally moved. Not with panic, but with a strange, exhausted calm. She opened the wardrobe, his side still full, untouched. Her hands brushed over the suit she had chosen, the ties she'd bought when he first got promoted. Now they felt like relics from another life. She packed her things in silence. The clothes, the books, the framed photo from their first trip to Paris. Her movements were steady, deliberate, as if each folded shirt was a goodbye. She refused to speak aloud. The sound of her credit card being declined came first, at a cafe down the street, when she tried to pay for coffee. Then again at the grocery store. Each time the cashier's awkward smile cut deeper than words. The realization hit her slowly, like cold water seeping through cracks. Nathan had already cut her off. Within a day, her phone lit up with notifications. The CEO's wife no more. Reed divorce confirmed. from Wall Street darling to desperate housewife. The headlines spread like wildfire, twisting her silence into guilt, her dignity into mockery. They called her the wife who didn't know when to leave. They painted him as the visionary who finally moved on. Emma shut her laptop. The screen went black, and with it, something inside her finally broke. She sat on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, the glow of the city spilling through the windows like a cruel reminder that life outside went on, perfectly fine without her. Hours blurred. The sky dimmed again. She didn't remember when she stopped crying. Only the sound of her own breathing remained. Then her phone rang. At first she didn't want to answer, but the name flashing on the screen made her heart clench. Richard Reed, Nathan's father. The man who built Reed Holdings from nothing. The man Nathan had stopped visiting months ago. She hesitated, then picked up. "Emma." His voice was rough, commanding, but not unkind. "I heard what happened." She swallowed hard, trying to sound composed. "I'm fine, Richard, really." A pause. Then his tone softened, the edge giving way to quiet disappointment. "You're lying. I can hear it in your voice. He's a fool, that boy, just like his mother used to say he'd be." Emma closed her eyes. A tear slipped down despite her best effort. "I don't know what to do." "Yes, you do," Richard said firmly. "Pack your things, Emma. You belong with family, not outside it." She opened her mouth to protest, but he didn't give her the chance. "I'll send a car in the morning." "You're not staying there another night." The call ended, leaving her with a strange mix of relief and dread. She looked around the empty penthouse, the marble floors, the art Nathan had bought to impress people he didn't care about, the scent of a man who no longer existed in her life. That night, Emma slept on the couch, surrounded by suitcases and silence. She didn't dream. When morning came, the doorman called up to announce a car waiting downstairs. Outside, a black Bentley gleamed beneath the gray sky, the kind of quiet luxury that carried the weight of old money and older power. The driver, an elderly man in a dark coat, tipped his hat respectfully. "Mrs. Reed, Mr. Richard sent me." She nodded, clutching her coat tighter. For the first time in days, she felt the faintest flicker of safety. The drive to Greenwich was long, cutting through the wet sprawl of New York before giving way to winding roads lined with autumn trees. Emma watched raindrops trail down the window, her reflection pale against the passing blur of gold and gray. By the time they reached the Reed estate, dusk had fallen. The mansion stood at the edge of a vast lawn, grand but worn, its windows glowing with the kind of warmth money couldn't buy. Richard Reed was waiting for her at the door. He looked older than she remembered, thinner, slower, but his eyes, sharp and assessing, missed nothing. When he saw her, something softened in his face. "You look tired," he said simply. Emma tried to smile. "It's been a long week," he nodded, stepping aside. "Then it's over now. You're home." The words nearly undid her. For the first time since that night, Emma felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Belonging. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and old books. A fire crackled in the study down the hall. Richard led her there, gesturing to the chair opposite his. "Sit," he said. "You need food, and a plan." As she lowered herself into the seat, Emma realized he wasn't just offering shelter. He was offering something far more powerful, a chance to start again. And for the first time in days, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the story Nathan ended wasn't truly over. It was only changing hands. The sound of gravel crunching under the tires echoed through the long driveway as Emma's car rolled to a stop in front of the old Reed mansion. The estate stood quietly in Greenwich, vast, elegant, and heavy with history. Ivy crawled across stone walls, and the windows reflected the pale morning light, like the eyes of something ancient and watchful. It had been years since Emma last stepped foot here. Back then, she was the smiling young wife who used to accompany Nathan to family dinners, always sitting beside him, always invisible under his father's sharp gaze. But today she wasn't the daughter-in-law anymore. She was something else, a woman invited back not by love, but by purpose. Richard Reed waited for her at the entrance. His posture was straight despite his age, his expression unreadable. "Emma," he greeted curtly. "You look thinner." "I suppose that's what happens when your world falls apart," she replied with a faint smile. Richard's eyes softened for a brief second. Then, with a motion of his cane, he said, "Come inside. We have work to do." The mansion smelled faintly of cedar and old books. In the study, sunlight filtered through tall windows, illuminating stacks of financial reports and folders spread across the oak desk. "You built half of this empire with Nathan," Richard said, settling into his chair. "I know that. You saw things he never could?" Emma hesitated. "I just helped where I could." Richard gave a dry laugh. "Don't lie to me. I may be old, but I'm not blind. Nathan may have my blood, but he doesn't have my instincts." "You do." Those words startled her. For years, she had worked quietly behind Nathan, writing proposals, managing clients, building trust. Yet her name was never on anything. Hearing someone finally acknowledge it felt like oxygen after years underwater. Days turned into weeks. Under Richard's mentorship, Emma began to rediscover herself. Every morning, they'd sit in the library, poring over Reed Holdings' financials. Richard would explain the patterns, the traps, the politics hidden between numbers. "This company isn't just a business," he told her one afternoon, tapping the papers with a pen. "It's legacy, and legacies can be stolen if you don't watch who's holding the pen." She listened carefully, taking notes, her mind sharper than it had been in years. At night, she'd walk the mansion's garden, the same one where she once dreamed of building a family with Nathan. But now those dreams had withered. Something new was taking root. Resolve. Meanwhile, far away in Manhattan, Nathan and Sierra were living a different kind of dream. One made of champagne, magazine covers, and reckless spending. Sierra had become the new face of Reed Holdings' modern rebranding, flaunting the company's money as her own. She hosted influencer events under the Reed name, wearing diamonds Emma once wore. Nathan, drunk on validation, barely noticed the mounting debts or the uneasy investors. Back in Greenwich, Richard handed Emma another set of documents. "These," he said, "are your insurance. My will, my shares, my trust in you." Emma froze. "Richard, I can't." "You can, and you will," he interrupted firmly. "Nathan has lost himself. I won't let him lose what generations before him built." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why me?" "Because you still care," Richard said softly. "And that's something money can't buy." In the quiet that followed, Emma felt something shift, a mixture of gratitude, guilt, and determination. She wasn't just the woman who'd been left behind. She was becoming someone new, someone capable of rebuilding what had been broken. One evening, after reviewing the quarterly losses, Richard sighed deeply. "They're burning through cash faster than I imagined." Emma frowned. He's trying to impress her, to prove something. But all he's doing is destroying himself. Richard looked at her thoughtfully. "Then maybe it's time we let him." The statement hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Emma understood. Sometimes the only way for a man to see the truth was to watch everything he valued crumble. Later that night, standing on the balcony, Emma looked out at the vast estate, its quiet strength, its timeless calm. She could feel the storm coming, but for the first time she wasn't afraid. She was ready. Because while Nathan Reed was losing everything chasing a dream, Emma was quietly learning how to build an empire. The first frost came early that year. The garden outside the Reed estate, once golden with autumn leaves, was now pale and brittle under a veil of silver. Emma had grown used to the quiet rhythm of life there. The morning coffee with Richard, the evening spent reviewing reports, the gentle way he spoke about legacy as though it were something sacred. But peace has a way of breaking without warning. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Emma found Richard in his study, slumped over his desk, a pen still in his hand. The fireplace had burned low, the paper on his desk half finished, a letter addressed to her. For a long moment, she couldn't move. The world seemed to tilt, her heartbeat filling the silence. Then she crossed the room and placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. He was gone. Her knees buckled, but no tears came at first, just a hollow, cold disbelief. The man who had given her strength, who had taught her how to see beyond pain, had left quietly, without goodbye. When the news spread, it hit the company like thunder. Obituaries filled the papers. Richard Reed, visionary founder of Reed Holdings, passes away at 78. Nathan returned to the spotlight immediately. He arrived at the mansion in a sleek black car with Sierra by his side, cameras flashing as they stepped out. He was dressed impeccably. Dark suit, somber tie, eyes hidden behind designer sunglasses. Sierra clung to his arm like a polished accessory, her expression perfectly rehearsed grief. "He was such a great man," she murmured to the cameras, voice trembling just enough. Inside the church, the air smelled of lilies and rain. The ceremony was grand, attended by senators, CEOs, and socialites. Emma sat quietly in the second pew, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't wear expensive jewelry, only a simple black dress and the pearl earrings Richard had given her months earlier. She didn't need to perform sorrow. Hers was real. When the choir began to sing Amazing Grace, her tears finally fell. She remembered Richard's gravelly voice in the mornings, his dry humor, his unwavering belief in her potential. The man who had seen her when everyone else had looked past her. Nathan gave a flawless eulogy, speaking about his father's unmatched wisdom and legacy, his commitment to the Reed name. Every word was carefully chosen, every pause rehearsed. To the crowd, he was the picture of a devoted son. But when his eyes met Emma's across the aisle, she saw nothing, no grief, no guilt, just calculation. After the funeral, a private meeting was scheduled at the law firm that had handled Reed Holdings for generations. Only the immediate family and key executives were invited. The conference room overlooked the city skyline, cold, impersonal, and fitting for what was about to happen. Emma sat at one end of the long mahogany table. Nathan and Sierra sat at the other, their hands intertwined beneath the table. The lawyer, an older man named Harold Grant, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "This will is dated 6 months ago," Harold began. "Mr. Richard Reed was of sound mind and body at the time of signing. As executor of his estate, it is my duty to read his final wishes as written." The room stilled. Nathan leaned back, confident, his expression smug. He expected numbers, properties, control. He expected everything. Harold opened the folder and began to read. "To my son, Nathaniel Reed, I leave $1 and my personal collection of timepieces, as a reminder that time, once wasted, can never be bought back." Nathan straightened, the color draining from his face. A faint, incredulous laugh escaped his throat. "Is this some kind of joke?" Harold didn't flinch. "To my loyal daughter-in-law, Emma Carter Reed," he continued, "I leave full control of Reed Holdings, including all associated assets, trusts, and properties. I do so in confidence that she will protect this legacy with integrity, as she always has." Silence. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to stop. Sierra's grip on Nathan's hand tightened, nails digging into his skin. "That can't be right," Nathan said, voice rising. He couldn't give her the company. "She's not even your wife?" Harold interrupted calmly. "The marriage certificate on record has not been annulled. Legally, she still bears your name." Nathan shot to his feet, pacing. No, this is manipulation. She must have gotten to him. Convinced him while he was sick." "He wasn't sick," Harold replied firmly. "I met with him personally. He was lucid and deliberate. In fact, he insisted I include a personal note to you both." He pulled a sealed envelope from the folder and read aloud. "To Nathan, I built something worth more than profit, and you mistook it for power. I hope one day you understand the difference. To Emma, protect what he never valued. Make it mean something again." When Harold finished, the room was frozen in disbelief. Emma couldn't speak. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap, not from excitement, but from shock. She had never expected this, never even dreamed it. Nathan turned toward her, fury flashing behind his polished facade. "You think you've won?" He hissed under his breath. "You're nothing without my name." Emma met his gaze, calm and steady. "Then it's a good thing the company doesn't need your name anymore," she said quietly. Sierra looked from one to the other, realization dawning that the empire she had flaunted on social media now belonged to the woman she'd mocked. Nathan stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Sierra hesitated, then followed, her heels clicking like gunshots down the marble hallway. When the room emptied, Harold turned to Emma. "He may contest it," he warned. "But Richard's documentation is airtight. Everything is legally yours." Emma nodded slowly, still processing. She rose from her chair and walked to the window. Below, the city glowed under a gray sky, restless, alive, waiting. "He trusted me," she murmured. "I can't fail him." For the first time since Nathan had walked out of her life, she didn't feel powerless. She felt anchored, not by revenge, but by responsibility. Outside, the rain began to fall again, soft and deliberate, as though the heavens themselves were sealing Richard's promise. The world thought Emma Carter Reed had been left with nothing. But in truth, she had just inherited everything. The ink on Richard's will was barely dry when the news hit the world. The wife he rejected now owns his fortune. Emma Carter Reed, the silent queen of Wall Street. Within hours, her face, once blurred in the background of her husband's success, was on every magazine cover, every business headline. Some called it poetic justice. Others called it scandal. But to Emma, it wasn't a victory. It was a duty. She hadn't asked for this crown. But now that it rested on her head, she intended to wear it with purpose. The morning after the will was executed, Emma arrived at the Reed Holdings headquarters for the first time in over a year. The glass tower on Fifth Avenue gleamed under the winter sun, cold, imposing, and unfamiliar. As she stepped into the lobby, every conversation fell silent. Cameras clicked. Employees whispered her name. "Is that her? She actually got the company? God, she looks different." And she did. Gone was the quiet woman who used to wait for Nathan after board meetings. In her place stood someone composed, distant, dressed in a black tailored coat and the same pearl earrings Richard had given her. A symbol of continuity, a reminder of who really built this empire. The elevator doors closed, sealing her in with her reflection. Her heartbeat echoed softly against the hum of machinery. When they opened again, the top floor awaited. Nathan's former domain, his nameplate was gone. Hers was already engraved in gold, Emma Carter Reed, chairwoman and CEO. The board meeting that morning was electric with tension. 12 men sat around the long table, some curious, some openly skeptical. A few looked at her like she didn't belong there at all. Emma placed her files down carefully, her movements deliberate. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice calm but steady, "we have work to do." A man in a navy suit leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Reed, with all due respect, do you have experience running a corporation of this scale?" Emma met his gaze. "I helped build this one from scratch. You just didn't notice because my name wasn't on the reports." Silence spread. She clicked the remote, and the screen behind her came alive. Charts, data, projections. "Reed Holdings is drowning in debt," she continued. "The luxury division Nathan launched under Sierra Blake's supervision is losing millions. The brand partnerships are vanity projects with no ROI. If we continue like this, we'll be bankrupt in 2 years." Someone cleared his throat nervously. "What's your plan, ma'am?" Emma looked up, her eyes sharp. "We clean house." That week, the empire began to shake. The Sierra Blake collection, a luxury fashion line bleeding cash, was shut down within 48 hours. Influencers raged online. Sierra called it sabotage. Emma didn't respond. She didn't need to. Next came the internal audit. Corruption, mismanagement, and inflated expenses had rotted the company from the inside. Emma ordered terminations. Entire departments were dissolved. Executives who once laughed behind her back now avoided her in the hallways. Through it all, she worked tirelessly. She read through years of neglected reports, took midnight calls with investors, and rebuilt trust one meeting at a time. Nathan, meanwhile, was losing control. From his penthouse, he watched the news unravel his life. Every headline cut deeper. His calls to the board went unanswered. His access cards were revoked. He stormed into the building once, demanding an explanation, but security met him in the lobby. "I'm Nathan Reed," he shouted. "This is my company." "Not anymore, sir," one guard replied quietly. He caught a glimpse of Emma through the glass doors, poised, focused, her assistant handing her documents as she walked toward the conference room. She didn't even look in his direction. That somehow hurt more than any betrayal. In the weeks that followed, Emma sold off non-essential assets. The media called it ruthless. Investors called it genius. By the end of the quarter, Reed Holdings had not only stabilized, it was profitable again. During an interview on CNBC, the host asked, "Mrs. Reed, how did you manage to turn the company around so quickly?" Emma smiled faintly, by remembering what it was built on. Integrity, not ego. "My father-in-law taught me that." The clip went viral. Comments flooded in. Admiration, surprise, disbelief. But one thing was certain. The world had started to see her not as a victim, but as a force. Late one night, Emma sat alone in Richard's old office, now hers. The city glittered beyond the glass wall, lights reflecting off the river like 1,000 restless thoughts. She picked up a photo frame from the desk. A younger Richard, standing beside a much younger Nathan. A pang of sadness crossed her face. "He could have had it all," she whispered. Her assistant Clara knocked gently. "Ma'am, the press is requesting a statement about Mr. Nathan's appeal against the will." Emma sighed. "There's nothing to say. The truth doesn't need defending." Clara hesitated. "Do you ever regret any of this?" Emma turned to face her, eyes steady. "Regret? Maybe. But Richard trusted me with something bigger than revenge. I'm just making sure his life's work means something." Meanwhile, Nathan's downfall became a public spectacle. His assets were frozen, his reputation shredded. Sierra left him, selling their story to a gossip magazine titled, "I Love the Man Who Lost Everything." He read it alone in a dark apartment, surrounded by empty bottles and unpaid bills. His reflection in the glass looked nothing like the man who once ruled Wall Street. When he saw Emma on TV again, standing at the podium of Reed Tower, announcing a new foundation in Richard's name, he turned the screen off. The sound of her voice was unbearable, but deep down, beneath the bitterness, a part of him knew. She wasn't just avenging herself. She was doing what he never could, leading with heart. Back at Reed Holdings, Emma stood before a room full of employees, the same people who once doubted her. "We've all lost something," she said quietly. "A leader, a mentor, a man who believed that building a company meant building people. Richard Reed didn't create this empire alone, and neither will I. We'll rebuild it together." Applause filled the hall, hesitant at first, then genuine. For the first time in years, the company felt alive again. Emma looked out over the crowd, faces of people who once whispered behind her back, now watching her with respect. And in that moment, she knew she didn't need anyone's approval. She had already earned her place. Outside, the winter wind howled down Fifth Avenue, carrying with it the whispers of a city that loved nothing more than a comeback story. Nathan Reed had lost his empire. But Emma Carter Reed, the woman he'd once dismissed, had built something far greater. Not out of vengeance, but out of vision. And this time, it was her name that gleamed in gold at the top of the tower. For weeks after the board's announcement, Nathan's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, lawyers, shareholders, friends pretending to care. He ignored them all. He stayed in his penthouse, curtains drawn, drinking whiskey for breakfast, watching his empire crumble on every business channel. Reed. Holdings posts record recovery under Emma Carter. Reed. From CEO to outsider. The fall of Nathan Reed. Each headline felt like a punch to the gut. He tried to convince himself that it was temporary, that Emma would fail eventually. "She doesn't have the stomach for this," he muttered to the empty room. "She's just a face for Richard's sympathy." But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. The company he once ruled now ran better than ever. Investors who once worshipped him now lined up to praise her. Reed Holdings' stock soared. The media called her the Iron Widow of Wall Street. And for the first time in his life, Nathan had nothing to say. Sierra tried to stay optimistic at first. She still had her looks, her brand deals, her followers. "We'll bounce back," she told him over dinner one night, twirling a fork between manicured fingers. "We just need the right publicity. Maybe a tell-all interview, something that makes us look like victims." Nathan barely looked up. "Victims?" he said flatly. "We burned down an empire, Sierra. Who's supposed to feel sorry for that?" Her lips tightened. "Don't talk to me like that. You think I signed up for this?" He slammed his glass down, amber liquid splashing across the table. "You signed up for the lifestyle. Don't pretend otherwise." The argument spiraled. It always did now. Within days, Sierra began spending more time out. Meetings, events, photo shoots, excuses that fooled neither of them. Nathan didn't ask. He didn't have the energy. Soon, the invitations stopped coming. The parties, the interviews, the designer gifts, gone. Fashion brands quietly pulled her name from campaigns. Her PR team stopped answering calls. Without Reed Holdings behind her, Sierra Blake was just another pretty face past her peak. One morning, Nathan woke to find half the closet empty. Her dresses, her jewelry, even her favorite perfume were gone. On the counter, a single note. "I tried, Nathan, but I can't live like this. Maybe you'll understand one day." He laughed bitterly. "Yeah, I understand," he muttered. "You're just like me." The legal battle hit next. Nathan tried to contest the will, a desperate, expensive move that only made him look worse. Every court hearing ended the same way. Emma's lawyers, armed with airtight documentation, dismantled his arguments piece by piece. The judge barely hid his disdain. When the final verdict came, it was short and brutal. "All claims by Nathan Reed are hereby dismissed. Costs to be paid by the plaintiff. He owed more than he had left. His remaining properties were seized, credit cards maxed out, bank accounts frozen. The penthouse, the one Emma once called home, was repossessed within a month." He packed what little he had into boxes, his father's watches clinking inside like ghosts of his former life. The same reporters who once begged for quotes now followed him down the lobby stairs, shouting questions. "Mr. Reed, how does it feel losing everything? Did Emma set you up? Do you regret leaving her?" He kept walking, jaw tight, eyes hidden behind sunglasses that no longer made him look powerful. Just pathetic. Nathan moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. Small, dimly lit with pipes that groaned like they resented him. The paint peeled near the window. The bed creaked. The neighbors argued through paper-thin walls. He didn't unpack the boxes. Didn't hang the art. Didn't even bother to connect the Wi-Fi. Each morning, he sold another watch. One by one, the collection disappeared. The last pieces of a man who once measured his worth in luxury. By the third month, he was down to 3 watches and a stack of unpaid bills. He tried reaching out to old friends. Calls went unanswered. Messages left on read. The same people who toasted him in penthouses now ghosted him completely. Sometimes he'd walk past Reed Tower, his old building, just to see if his name was still there. It wasn't. Instead, banners of Emma lined the glass facade. Innovation, integrity, renewal. He'd stand across the street, watching the revolving doors, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. He never did. The final blow came on a rainy Thursday. Nathan was flipping through channels when he saw her, Sierra, on national television. Her face was flawless as ever, framed by studio lights, but her eyes were flat, rehearsed. The headline beneath her read, "Exclusive. Sierra Blake breaks silence on the Reed Empire." He froze. The interview was everything he feared and more. Sierra painted herself as the naive model caught in the crossfire of a toxic marriage. She cried on cue, describing how Nathan changed after losing power, how he became controlling, paranoid, even dangerous. She sold him out for sympathy, and a 6-figure deal with Page 6. "I tried to help him," she said tearfully. "But some people can't be saved." Nathan sat in the dark, staring at the screen until his reflection blurred with hers. Then he laughed, long, bitter, hollow. "Of course you did. he whispered. "You always knew how to survive." He switched off the TV, the silence deafening. Outside, rain hammered the glass, steady and merciless. Weeks later, Nathan stumbled across her face again. Emma's, on the cover of Forbes. The Iron Widow of Wall Street. How Emma Carter. Reed rebuilt an empire with grace and grit. He stared at the headline until the words blurred. She looked radiant, calm, confident, unshakable. Her smile wasn't vengeful. It was peaceful. The article praised her leadership, her innovation, her philanthropy. It mentioned her new scholarship foundation for women in finance, her commitment to ethical business, her humility despite power. There was one quote that stopped him cold. "Pain can destroy you or refine you." I chose the latter. He shut the magazine. The sound was small, final. For a long time he sat there, the weight of everything pressing down on him. The arrogance, the greed, the blindness. For years, he thought power made him untouchable, but power had never been his. It had always been borrowed, from his father's name, from Emma's faith, from luck he never deserved. Now, stripped of everything, he finally saw what he'd thrown away. At night, he dreamed of her, the way she used to laugh, the way she once believed in him. In the dream, she was always walking away, the city lights fading behind her. He'd wake up alone, the ticking of his last watch echoing through the silence. One evening, he stood by the cracked window, watching the city skyline flicker in the distance. From Brooklyn, Reed Tower looked like a shard of light, unreachable, immaculate. He lifted his father's old watch, turning it in his hands. The second hand ticked steadily, indifferent. "Time," his father once said, "is the only currency that never forgives." Nathan set the watch on the table, its ticking filling the room. On the muted TV, Emma's voice drifted through a commercial for her new foundation. "For every woman told she isn't enough, remember, silence can be your greatest weapon." Nathan exhaled, a sound between a laugh and a sob. He looked out over the city he once owned and whispered, "You were right. Emma, you always were." The rain began again, slow, steady, endless, washing over the glass like absolution. And somewhere, across the river, the Iron Widow of Wall Street stood before a crowd of graduates, smiling with quiet pride, unaware that the man who had once ruled her world was now just another shadow watching from afar. This part is the emotional valley, the retribution arc. Nathan's downfall is portrayed not with vengeance, but poetic justice. Emma's rise contrasts his decay, turning the story into a reflection on loss, humility, and redemption. The year that followed rewrote everything. Emma Carter Reed became a symbol, not of wealth or tragedy, but of rebirth. Under her leadership, Reed Holdings flourished beyond prediction. Her name became synonymous with strength. She was invited to panels, galas, and award ceremonies. Yet through all the applause, she remained private, detached. There were no new relationships, no scandals, no dramatic headlines. Just work and silence. But some nights, when she stood by her office window and watched the city glitter below, she thought of the past. Not with bitterness, but with a strange quiet sorrow, like a song she'd once loved but no longer sang. That winter was colder than usual. Snow had fallen all afternoon, blanketing Fifth Avenue in a hushed, glittering white. The world looked peaceful, untouched, almost forgiving. Emma stayed late at Reed Tower that night, finishing the last details of the company's annual charity gala. The office was empty except for the soft hum of the heater and the faint glow of the city beyond the glass. She closed her laptop, slipped into her wool coat, and stepped into the elevator. As the doors opened on the ground floor, the lobby lights reflected off the marble, clean, elegant, just like everything she had rebuilt. Outside, her driver was waiting by the black sedan. The air was sharp with winter wind. Emma pulled her coat tighter as she walked toward the car, and then she stopped. A figure stood under the street lamp across the road. At first, she thought it was a stranger, a homeless man perhaps, until he lifted his head. Even through the snow, she recognized him instantly. Nathan Reed. He looked nothing like the man she had once married. The sharp suits were gone, replaced by a frayed coat and boots worn thin. His hair, once perfectly styled, was messy, his face gaunt, tired. But it was his eyes that struck her, hollow, remorseful, and unbearably human. For a long moment, neither moved. The city went on around them, taxis hissing through slush, headlights slicing the night, but it felt like they were standing in a bubble of silence. Finally, he stepped forward, the snow crunching beneath his feet. "Emma," his voice cracked, rough and low, "please, just let me talk." She didn't answer. He stopped a few feet away, soaked from the snow, hands shaking. "I was stupid. I thought I knew what I wanted, but I didn't. I ruined everything. I ruined you." Emma's breath formed small clouds in the air. Her voice, when it came, was calm. Too calm. "You didn't ruin me, Nathan. You freed me." He flinched like she had struck him. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said desperately. "The company, the money, I don't care about any of it now. I just want a chance to make things right." Emma tilted her head slightly. The snow fell between them like fragments of time. "A chance?" she repeated softly. "Nathan, when you left, I begged for that. For you to see me. You had all the chances in the world." He swallowed hard, stepping closer. "I see you now. I swear I see you." Her lips curved, not in cruelty, but in something almost sad. "You see the woman you lost. Not the one I've become." Nathan's voice trembled. "Emma, please. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just something. A word. Anything." She studied him quietly. The man who once ruled boardrooms, who once thought love was an inconvenience. Now he stood before her, broken by the same pride that once defined him. "I used to think love was about saving someone," she said finally. "But it's not. Sometimes it's about knowing when to stop saving them." He took a breath that sounded almost like a sob. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me." Her eyes glistened in the glow of the streetlight. "And you were the lesson I had to learn." For a moment, he looked away, blinking back tears he refused to let fall. "I lost everything," he whispered. "My father, my company, my friends, and you." Emma's expression softened, but her voice remained steady. "You didn't lose me, Nathan. You let me go. That's not the same thing." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of snow and city smoke. Emma glanced at the car idling nearby. The driver watched quietly, understanding the gravity of what he was witnessing. Nathan's shoulders sagged. "Do you ever think about us?" he asked, almost childlike. "About what we used to be?" She hesitated. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But when I do, it feels like watching strangers in an old movie. Beautiful, but long gone." He gave a bitter smile. "I guess I deserve that." "No," she said softly. "You deserve peace, and so do I." The traffic light changed, casting red across the wet pavement. Emma took a slow step forward, her boots splashing gently through the slush. "You once said I was just the background," she murmured. "Turns out I was the entire picture." Nathan's breath caught, his eyes wide with pain and realization. "Emma," he whispered. "I'm sorry." She looked at him one last time, not with anger, not even pity, but closure. "I know." Then she turned, opened the car door, and stepped inside. Through the fogged window, she saw him still standing there, small against the towering skyline, the snow falling around him like ashes. The light from Reed Tower shimmered across the street, reflecting in the puddles at his feet. As the car pulled away, Nathan dropped to his knees on the curb, the cold soaking through his clothes. The sound of the city swallowed his whisper. "I loved you. I just didn't know how." Inside the car, Emma closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek, not from pain, but release. She turned her head toward the window, watching the city blur by. The streets that once witnessed her humiliation now bore witness to her peace. The driver glanced at her through the mirror. "Home, ma'am?" Emma nodded. "Yes, home." When she arrived at her townhouse, the snow had begun to fade into soft rain. She stepped out, breathing in the crisp air. For the first time in years, she felt light, as if a weight she didn't know she still carried had finally lifted. Inside, the fireplace crackled gently. On the mantel sat a framed photo of Richard Reed, smiling beside a younger Emma. She touched the edge of the frame and whispered, "It's done." Her phone buzzed with another headline alert. Reed Foundation expands to fund women entrepreneurs nationwide. Emma smiled faintly. That was what mattered now, building something meaningful from what once broke her. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the streets clean. Somewhere across the city, a man who once had everything sat alone under the same sky, realizing too late that the greatest loss isn't fortune, it's the heart you never learn to keep. This chapter delivers the emotional payoff, quiet, cinematic, and bittersweet. The rain, snow, and light imagery emphasize rebirth and closure. The dialogue is minimal, but heavy with subtext, perfect for an audio narration that lingers on silence, breath, and reflection. The city had changed by the time spring returned, warmer, brighter, alive again. But so had Emma Carter Reed. 6 months had passed since that winter night, since she walked away from the man who once defined her and stepped fully into the life she built for herself. The world had begun to call her something new now, not the Iron Widow or the woman behind Reed Holdings, but simply Emma Reed, a name that carried quiet power and dignity. And on this day, under the soft April sun, she stood before a crowd of cameras and students, ready to open the doors to something far greater than an empire. The courtyard buzzed with energy. Journalists from major networks lined up, microphones gleaming beneath silver tripods. A large banner stretched across the marble facade of the new building. The Richard Reed Innovation Center, founded by Emma Carter. Reed EB facility stood on a plot of land that once belonged to the old Reed manufacturing plant, rebuilt, redesigned, reborn. It wasn't just a building, it was a promise. A place for young minds from struggling backgrounds, those who dreamed of creating, building, changing the world. Emma stepped onto the podium. Her hair, swept neatly into a low bun, caught the morning light. The cameras clicked endlessly, but she wasn't nervous. Not anymore. She looked out at the faces before her, students, teachers, reporters, and former colleagues, and smiled gently. 6 years ago, she began, her voice steady. This company lost its direction, and so did I. But I learned that rebuilding isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about doing what's right, even when no one's watching. The crowd quieted. Emma continued, "This center isn't about wealth. It's about opportunity. For every young dreamer who's ever been told they're not enough, I want them to know they are. True legacy isn't what you keep, it's what you build for others." Applause erupted. Not the kind born from spectacle, but from respect. Behind her, the glass doors opened, revealing halls filled with computers, classrooms, and labs. The future? Open, waiting. Emma turned to the camera for the live broadcast. To the students watching from home, this is for you. Dream loudly, build bravely, and never let silence define you. Miles away, the same broadcast flickered across an old television in a rehabilitation center on the outskirts of Brooklyn. The walls were white, sterile, humming faintly with fluorescent lights. On a narrow bed sat Nathan Reed, thinner than before, his once polished hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the volume. The moment Emma's face appeared on screen, he froze. Her voice filled the small room, calm, clear, resolute. The same voice that once spoke softly across their dinner table, that once called his name with love. Now, it carried the weight of purpose. He couldn't look away. A nurse passed by, glancing at the screen. "She's something, huh?" she said kindly. "Smart, beautiful, really turned her life around." Nathan smiled faintly, his eyes never leaving the image. "She always was," he whispered. When the applause broke out on screen, he closed his eyes. A single tear slipped down, cutting through the exhaustion on his face. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't regret. It was acceptance. the painful kind that comes when you finally understand what you destroyed. He reached for the old watch resting on the nightstand, his father's, and turned it over in his hands. The ticking filled the silence. For the first time in years, it didn't sound like a countdown. It sounded like mercy. That evening, after the event, Emma stood alone in the garden behind the Innovation Center. The air was soft, filled with the scent of spring rain and blooming lilacs. She looked up at the engraved name on the building, Richard Reed, and smiled. "We did it," she whispered. "You'd be proud." A light breeze carried her words into the air. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting the moment sink in. In her heart, there was no bitterness, no lingering anger. The storm had long passed. What remained was peace, the kind that came from knowing she hadn't just survived, but transformed. Her assistant, Clara, approached quietly. "The press wants a final photo, Mrs. Reed." Emma nodded. "Just one moment." Clara hesitated, then smiled. "You know, he would have loved this place." "Mr. Richard?" Emma looked back at the building. "He already does." Later that night, the evening news replayed the speech across every major channel. The final shot lingered on Emma, standing before the new academy, proud, elegant, unshaken. Her words echoed through living rooms, coffee shops, and offices across America. True legacy isn't what you keep, it's what you build for others. And somewhere, a man who had lost everything finally smiled at the truth of it. In the closing scene of the video, the narration soft, reflective, the camera pans across New York at dusk. The city glows gold against the fading sky. Reed Tower stands tall, the Innovation Center's lights shining like a beacon of second chances. A woman's voice, Emma's, speaks over the montage. Never underestimate a woman who was once silent. Because when she rises, she doesn't just win, she rewrites the story. The music swells, soft piano, then strings, as the screen fades to black. And in that silence, her story lingers, not as revenge, not as tragedy, but as rebirth. This final chapter completes Emma's arc from pain to purpose. The story closes with symmetry. Emma's success built on compassion, Nathan's downfall tempered by humility, and Richard's legacy reborn through her. Perfect for a cinematic or podcast-style narration, ending with a powerful emotional quote and music fade out. And so, Emma Carter Reed's story wasn't one of revenge, but of rebirth. From betrayal came strength, from silence came purpose, and from loss came legacy. In a world that often mistakes kindness for weakness, Emma proved that grace is power, and that true victory isn't in taking back what was lost, but in building something that will last beyond yourself. Some stories end in heartbreak. Hers began again in hope, because when a woman rises from ruin, she doesn't just rewrite her life. She changes the meaning of every word written against her. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Veil of Hearts. Tell us, what part of Emma's journey inspired you most? Your engagement helps us bring more stories of love, redemption, and second chances to life. Thank you for listening, for feeling, and for believing that even after the darkest storms, the heart can rise again.